When
you look at any game, you see the company name
Film Busters.
Bridge or the copyright info might automatically assume they developed the game. For example, I that must mean they developed it, right? That's not always the case. Arcade game, they could either micro. Are only inside red doors. Convenient. You control the elevator when you're inside, but they you can shoot enemies with your gun, but you die in one hit. The NES version happens to be Nick's first game. The arcade experience was captured quite well, with the controls and mechanics being exactly the same. Speaking of controls, my only complaint about this game is how difficult it is to enter doors and use escalators. I usually have to try more than once. When you duck, you're locked in that position until you press up, which is unusual. The frame rate is also not great, which is a trend you're going to see in many Micronix games. To be fair though, all these issues were also present in the arcade version. Micronix was only hired to port over the arcade game, not improve it. For being their first project, Micronix did a great job with this game. Micronix did develop some Japanese exclusives. Here's Gaimos, which was published by ASCII. It's a rail shooter that's inspired by Space Harrier. You can shoot directly in front of you, but you also have missiles that can destroy the grounded enemies. You fight the same boss at the end of every stage, but if you don't defeat them in time, you have to redo the stage. The graphics are very well done. I love the 3D animated background and the amount of detail. You can also play Mode B, where the camera is focused on your ship instead of a fixed position. My biggest complaint is the perspective. Sometimes it's hard to tell where the red bullets are, especially when fighting the boss. You also don't get a lot of content. There's only a few stage backgrounds, and then it repeats. I'm not going to complain about it too much though, because it's a 40 kilobyte game and it was released in 1985. Micronix didn't only work with Taito or ASCII. Capcom hired them to port over some of their arcade games, some of which you've probably played. 1942 was originally an arcade game by Capcom. It's an early horizontal shooter. You die in one hit, but you can perform rolls that make you invulnerable to enemies. You can only roll a temporary amount of times though. There's various power-ups you can collect, like this one, which gives you more firepower. The game is challenging because of the one-hit deaths and unpredictable enemy patterns. These larger aircraft should be destroyed immediately because they fire off spread shots, which can be hard to avoid. The game is a little too basic for shoot-'em-up standards, but that's understandable because of when it was released, 1984. It seems like the NES version would be able to handle a game like this with no problem, right? Okay, I'm gonna try to be as positive as I can. Micronix did capture the arcade experience for the most part. The stages are similar, the power-ups are the same, and the controls feel like the arcade original. But I do have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. The game looks like crap. The graphics are far worse, there's more flickering, and the frame rate looks terrible. Honestly, this could pass for an unlicensed game. For some reason, it'll be stationary while the screen moves up and down. It's common for developers to use background tiles for bosses, but why not make everything around it a solid color to give the illusion of the aircraft moving? Anyway, it's playable, but could have been better if it were developed by somebody else. Ghosts and Goblins was another arcade game that could have been better if it were to give the illusion of the aircraft moving. Anyway, it's playable, but could have been better if it were developed by somebody else. Ghosts and Goblins was another arcade game that was later received an NES for
Film Busters.
Tomb Busters. I think that game's okay. Hey, isn't that the game that you were playing? There's some of those games I can see.
You can only take
The ones that
before you
you're
die,
playing.
and you can control the direction while in the air. Because of the colorful graphics and multi-directional scrolling, I imagine this would be difficult to port over to the NES. Against all odds though, Micronix made it happen. I'm really nervous to see how this one turned out. The gameplay is actually pretty close to the arcade version. All the levels are here, and the controls feel exactly the same. Surprisingly, the game scrolls in multiple directions, which is uncommon in early NES games. In general, I do find this one a little more impressive than 1942, but there's still some obvious issues. The graphics took a significant downgrade with far less colors and smaller sprites. The frame rate, once again, is very poor. All things considered, it's an acceptable port, but had it been released 3 years later, it would have turned out much better. Here's the arcade version of Sun Sun. It's a cross between a platformer and a shooter. You can migrate between any platform by jumping up and down. The game can be challenging because you can only jump straight up and there's holes in some of the platforms. The enemies can also jump between platforms, which means they can intercept you. It's a simple concept, but a decent game. Once again, Capcom commissioned Micronix to develop the Famicom version. Unlike the previous two games, this one only came out in Japan. It's the same game, with massive flickering and slowdown. When there's crawl when there's a lot going on. Even the introduction has some flickering, which is pathetic. The game is actually a bit easier than the arcade version because the slowdown gives you more time to react. Outside of that, the gameplay is nearly identical to the arcade original. I'm not sure why Capcom hired Micronix for so many projects. Were they really that impressed with their work? But I do have to be fair that these were all early NES games before rammers were popular. Sometimes a publisher might originally hire one company to develop a series of games, but then decide to hire a different one later on. The original Ninja-kun on the NES was published by Jaleco, but they decided to hire Toei to develop it. The game inspired the Ninja Jaja Maru-kun series, which were all developed by Jaleco and Capcom. But the official sequel to the original Ninja-kun was actually developed by Micronix. Interesting that Jaleco decided to switch companies. Maybe it was cheaper. You play as a stubby red ninja, and it's a basic platformer. You start off with a shuriken, but every few stages you earn a new weapon. You die in one hit, but only from projectiles. It's one of the few games where touching an enemy doesn't hurt you. The most difficult aspect of the game is the limited controls. You can't change your direction mid-air, which means you can walk away. You can only shoot directly in front or at an angle of the bomb weapon. There is a fire weapon, which is super nice, but it's only temporary. You can wall jump, but it's super delayed and awkward.
Meet Nigel, our next page to reveal this, or Nigel tastes each batch of crisps every 4 hours. To make sure every bite tastes delicious. That's every 4 hours, not 4 seconds, Nigel.
What can I say? I take quality control very seriously.
August, your little slice of joy.
The game was originally in the arcade, and all the issues I just mentioned are in that one too, so Micronix does get a pass. Unfortunately though, like with all of Micronix games, the frame rate is terrible and there's tons of slowdown. To be fair, some levels do get a ton of enemies, so I don't see how the NES would have gotten around this. Overall, it is an okay port of the arcade original. I do wonder how it would have turned out under Toei or Jaleco though. Another company that Micronix worked with was SNK. Here's Akari Warriors. It's a run-and-gun game. You start off with a temporary amount of ammo and grenades that you can use throughout the stages. You can ride tanks, which have their own life bar, so it's always encouraged to take them if you see them. The controls could be better. Your character will always face the same direction if you use a joystick. Instead, you have separate buttons that will let you rotate. I find it difficult to rotate your character in time to hit the enemy that you want. Why not just point the joystick in the direction you want to shoot? The game is also unforgiving. You die in one hit, and you always start at the beginning of the stage if you lose all your lives, even if you choose to continue. It's not my favorite arcade game, but it's alright. Let's see what Micronix came up with. There's a few minor differences. Instead of pressing a separate button to rotate, you can now just point in the direction you want to shoot. If you lose all your lives, you can press ABBA to continue because the winner takes it all. As expected, the frame rate is terrible, and the graphics took a massive downgrade. At this point, I expect it. The controls are more delayed than you might think. It takes a while for your character to shoot in the direction you want. If it controlled like the top-down stages in Super C, it would have been better. When you're in the tank, you can only shoot upwards, and there's no way to get out when it's about to explode. This is the first port I've seen from Micronix where there's some noticeable gameplay differences from the arcade version. Overall, I like the controls better, but the arcade version is superior otherwise. So these are just a few of the games they developed. We can see a lot of the same issues between all of them. Poor frame rate, tons of flickering, extreme slowdown, and severely downgraded graphics. I would have never thought Elevator Action was made by the same developers as 1942, but that's absolutely the case. But to give credit where credit is due, the gameplay is nearly identical to their arcade counterparts. No major gameplay elements were sacrificed to make it possible on the NES. For example, Ghosts and Goblins still has every stage and retains multi-directional scrolling. That might have not been the case under a different developer. Going back to Capcom, their first 3 published games on the NES were all created by Micronex, but they would start developing games in-house starting with Commando. From here, we would see an improvement in quality. The sequel to 1942 was developed by Capcom, and this one turned out way better than Micronex game. But why didn't Capcom develop their own games right from the start? There's a few possibilities. Sometimes it was cheaper, easier, or quicker to hire someone else. If a publisher was in a bind and desperately needed a game, a developer like Micronex could make it happen. In the case of Capcom, with the Famicom being new, we didn't have the time or experience to develop games on that console yet, so they decided to hire someone that did. The only disadvantage is that you might get games like 1942 easiest. If you made it this far in the video, hit that subscribe button right there. And what is your experience with Capcom's early NES games? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. When a game is created without Nintendo's knowledge, it's considered an unlicensed game. Companies that created these titles generally didn't have the tools or resources to make games. Therefore, it's common for people to regard unlicensed games as bad. But is that always the case? I'm surprised at some of the higher quality games that haven't been unlicensed. Go ahead. What's going on? Very close to 30K. Only you can help me get there. And if you want to include any random screenshot, just go to discord.poser.net or click on the link in the description. Anyway, hopefully you like my hot takes. Let's talk about the best unlicensed games.
I unlocked another monster. Run monster codec.
There were companies that stood up to Nintendo and decided to make games, but
Oh, a regular fairy tale me so cry.
some companies had to do console, and as a result, use the NES's hardware and tools potential. This is why many unlicensed games tend to be bad. But are they all bad?
Correct.
Take a look at my personal
Oh yeah, unlocked another monster.
Oh, those monsters are really scary. This game seems to be going very well, isn't it?
Nick.
Yeah, what's the monster look like?
I'm also not counting compilations like
They're
that.
scary. They're really
That's
scary.
not a
And they've got
game.
some
That's
details about it.
Anyway, let's get started. Number 10. Towards the end of Wizardtree's run on the NES, they published Bible Buffet. Start with spinning some and using all of these pieces on the board. Depending on where you land, you can play a mini game. These are top-down segments where you have a projectile and you just have to find the exit. Some spots on the board are not mini games, but instead either like a quiz, advancement of the game, or get a turn. The controls are excellent. It doesn't feel like I'm moving on a grid, and you can actually walk diagonally. The graphics are nice with lots of variety on each of the minigame skills. They do a great job with presentation in general. This is a far better effort than color trees and It's a creative idea to make a mini board game like this. If you're playing with others, you would definitely have a fun time. Unfortunately, though, the minigame segments are dull. I find it boring to play these, and don't do it whatsoever, which doesn't help. This is a cool game, but it doesn't my interest for long. It's barely.
Under what monster you're gonna unlock? Here I suggestion, but it is great.
Puzzle game where you must collect all the still advance to the next stage. You have a projectile that you can shoot enemies with. The boulders in the game will fall if there's nothing below them. There is some strategy because you have to be careful with what block you shoot. The falling boulders might crush you. This will cause enemies and creatures that can be destroyed. You can also drop bombs, but I never found a good use for them. They don't even kill these, so I don't know why you're doing it. The fact that you get a projectile is nice because you don't have to worry about them. The controls are actually great. Usually in games like these, you're confined to a grid, but here you can actually move diagonally. The frame rate is also perfect, which is unusual for a color graded game.
Moving back to Barry.
Yeah, we might find that if you've got the raw talent of actually impressed on someone. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out a way to make him stay in Liverpool. You went out? Oh, absolutely. I'm born and raised in Birmingham.
Where did you come from then?
This, the Jurassic Coast. Where are you from, huh?
Big Lane, it's Belgium.
Lovely part of the world.
This is a surprisingly good title, but I have it lower on the list because the game does get boring fast and there's not much to it. Number 8. Color Dreams was having trouble selling their games because of Nintendo blocking them off from retail stores. As a response, they created
Well,
a
don't
comic
have you
book
watched it?
industry and they sold their games in Christian bookstores. Not only that, but their games would show some improvement. There's one title
These
they
are
come
games
back
going
to
to
the most, Sunday Funday. You play as a kid who's trying to make it to Sunday school. It's a platformer where you have to defeat all the enemies to make the screen move. It reminds me of a beat 'em up, but there's a lot of platforming, especially in the sewer stages. The graphics are good for unlicensed game standards. I especially like the background clouds that parallax scroll. I should mention that I'm specifically talking about Sunday Funday and not its predecessor, Venice Beach. Sunday Funday is a major improvement. The frame rate is way better in this version than it was in Venice Beach. Between the two, Sunday Funday is the one I recommend. But it's not a perfect game. Your attack has poor range, and it takes multiple hits to kill enemies. My only strategy is to keep flailing the attack and hope I get it. Some enemies can only be destroyed with bombs, and it's very hard to get the timing right. The AI patterns are so weird, they usually end up walking away before the bomb blows up. The level design in the sewer stages is very trolly. There's many obstacles that bounce you all over the level, and there's tons of bounce tricks. This game
I'm not the Ghost Bride, but the man
where you walk to the beat to beat the stage. Your character seems weak because you can only attack with a short-range club and you die in one hit. Like a projectile that grants you an extra hit. You can cause multiple attacks in a spreadsheet.
Internal fidget.
At the end of each stage, you fight a boss. In between stages, you can purchase items in the store that help you along the way. The graphics are nice and colorful with lots of detailed left, so you're unable to backtrack. The controls could use some improvement. Your character is very slippery, so it's hard to make tight jumps. When you don't have any projectile, your club has a very short range. Don't even bother trying to fight the boss without a projectile. The level design is also strange. You have to take leaps of faith, and you might miss opportunities to reach higher platforms because you can't move left. There's not much to this game, but sometimes you gotta stick with the basics. This is a more than acceptable unlicensed game, but definitely not my favorite platformer on the list. Number 6. This is a game I don't hear about at all, and that's a shame. It's Hellfighter by Sachin. It's a platformer with
I'm playing Tomb Busters.
projectile that protects you. The dark green orbs give you a spread shot weapon, which, in my opinion, is the best rate in the game.
I haven't said that.
Moving fire at the end of stage 1 and moving platforms on stage 2. Some of the boss battles are also very creative. I have to compliment the graphics a lot. The fire animation looks excellent and the bosses are well animated. It's surprising how big the sprites are in this game. While I do think this is a decent game, there are some things keeping it in number 6. You're only able to shoot directly in front of you, which limits your range. Strike also has very limited range, which makes striking blocks difficult. Your character is too far to the right when the screen is scrolling, which makes it hard to see. Which I think is a bit harsh. But you start off with no lives, and you actually do pick up where you left off if you're the boss. When I first played this game in my dedicated Sasha video, I had low expectations, but I was pleasantly surprised at how decent this was. This definitely deserves a spot on my list. Number 5. Some of the developers, they worked with making Russian games, but one licensing agreement that made lose the game. The latest game releases that require more of them grow. It makes sense to bring the number this. Titles later on. The game is commonly regarded as one of the best online the cursor moves one block at a time and cannot pass through walls. This makes the game feel very clunky, like I'm typing on a keyboard. I wish the cursor moved more slowly and could go through walls. But for an unlicensed game, this definitely deserves a spot on my list. Number 4. When you think of flight simulators, you might consider Top Gun on but Codemasters had a different formula. I normally find these types of games to be boring, but this one really surprised me. It's MiG-29 Soviet fighter. You start off in a perspective with multiple directions. Occasionally you will run slow, so you must get a refill. There's even bosses in this game, which helps it stand out from other flight simulators. Some stages even have a 2D top-down shooter segment that very well check. As you get further in the game, weapon upgrades and shot. Even answer the challenge. The controls are very floaty, which makes it tougher to avoid the enemies, and you die in one hit. The music is sector of yes.
Something is in your bottom. It's easy to sell. Download the app itself.
A lot of flight simulators try to aim for realistic gameplay and cool effects, like a rotating background, for example. This one doesn't aim for that, but instead just tries to
Looks like it's a good game. You like it. I mean, there are games that you play that you don't get in the States.
I normally don't enjoy games.
You don't need to have a drink, right? You can pause it at some point.
Sasha had a rough start on the NES, but they drastically improved with every game they made. One title in particular I consider to be their best, Boy. It's a platform where you
Defeats 3.
you're able to perform mid-air jumps to reach higher platforms.
Well done,
But
buddy.
if you jump or blow air too many times, Boy will be temporarily stunned, which leaves you vulnerable to lose. There's a lot of bottomless pits in this game, so you have to use your mid-air jumps. You can collect an item that temporarily lets you mid-air jump as many times as you want. The graphics are nice and you may want to compare this to Kirby, which is a big compliment. There's a lot of variety in the game too. In stage 2-5, you ride platforms while water above. 3-1 is an auto-scroller where you can fly. The music sounds like cheap, but some stages actually have good tracks. While this is a surprisingly good game, you can sometimes tell this is unlicensed. When you run out of air on a platform, you'll float in place while you catch your breath. That's a little weird. You also can't move in any direction when you're too close to the ceiling. I assume they did this so you can't walk on the top of the level, but it can be annoying because you can't jump over enemies that are too close to the top. It seems like Sachin really gave this their all. It's surprisingly good, which is why it earned its spot in number 3. Number 2. The company Codemasters will get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity when they
Again, they will make some stuff.
Micro Machines. I imagine most companies who obtain licenses to popular franchises really take their time and make sure the game is excellent. Codemasters did exactly that. I'm glad they went with a top-down perspective and not a Rad Racer-style game. You play as many different vehicles, each of which have different attributes. Some cars are extremely fast, while others handle differently in terrain. I'm actually amazed at how many stages there are in this game and how many cars they included. I thought I would hate the tank controls, but surprisingly they're well done. I didn't have any issues maneuvering, and I was able to turn at 90 and 180-degree angles with ease. The graphics are very well done. I really can't believe all the details they included, like cereal boxes on the table. This is honestly incredible. I'm very impressed with the fake Alex in the background, too. The game can be annoying at times. If you fall off the cliff or into water, you're penalized hard. Some stages have very little room for error, where even if you crash just once, you're not likely to win. But you do have multiple lives, so you're able to practice. It's funny to see a game that's licensed by Micro Machines, but no. If you haven't played this one, definitely check it out. There's a reason I have it at number 2. Number 1. In the early 90s, the Japanese company Hacker International had become a publisher of adult video games. One of their titles was released in the US under the name Bubble Bath Babes. Later on, American Video Entertainment would take the game and release a family-friendly version of it. The result is Mermaids of Atlantis. It's a falling blocks puzzle game where you line up 4 bubbles together to make them disappear. There's 2 gameplay modes. There's Stacked mode, where you start off with bubbles that are already on the board, and you must pop the one that has a letter. In the regular mode, you have to pop 200 bubbles to advance to the next stage. If you select the hardest difficulty, your board will not clear in between stages. There's also a 2-player mode, which I have to give a lot of credit for. Not even Tetris on the NES could do that. The game isn't just a ROM hack of Bubble Bath Babes, they actually added more features. For example, the hardest difficulty setting was not in the previous game, and now there's 3 songs to pick from instead of 2. The game is extremely addictive, and the fact that there's multiple gameplay modes gives us a lot of replayability. Graphically, the game looks nice, and the music is excellent. While this is a fantastic game, there's a few mechanics that some players may not like. Pieces that are dangling on the edge do not drop to the bottom, or should I say top. Some of the pieces are also very odd-shaped, which makes them hard to see.
What do you think of everything makes you cry? How is the game?
Puzzle game at number 1, but it's the same, and I'm glad this version doesn't have the stigma of being an adult video game. So, that's my list. Do you agree with my placements, or would you shuffle things around? Are there any games I didn't mention, or anything I should not have mentioned? I could see some people disagreeing with how Crazy Creatures is on the list, and how Sunday Funday even made it on here. Thank you all for watching. Hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, hit that like button. If you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button for more content. Both of these things help the channel grow. If you have anything to share, feel free to leave a comment. I read every single comment on this channel, and I'm pretty good at replying back. Anyway,
Can I chop your leg?
各位员工，请站稳扶好，前方到站，古属遗迹站。出勤的员工请做好下车准备。今天是平静的一天，请记得在商店采购好所需的办公用品。感谢您的配合。开门请当心，下车请注意安全，注意安全，安全，安全，安全。
Little we know the value of food can't be found on a price tag. It's the smell that wakes you up with a smile. Your nan's favourite that you made just because she's your nan. And long laughs on long evenings. Little we know the real value of food. It's not just what you pay, it's what you get back. Little, more to value.
You think of unlicensed or bootleg video games, the NES comes to mind.
So they didn't send
This
a
is
message
understandable because
for the
console
TV.
does have a- The NES
I don't know,
is the only
because
console with these types of games.
it's slightly complicated. I didn't buy it. So Melissa bought it. So Melissa may have had a load of things. I haven't had any correspondence about
It's
this,
coming at you with
this part of the process. I had the correspondence with Toshiba because
right there.
I don't know, but when I first phoned, I think I may have asked for the phone over, and she did the security check. But then from then on, I was dealing with Toshiba. Toshiba just dealt with me. But in terms of getting a refund and returning it, that's all to do with EE. And so they insist on just dealing with it. This is simply a message saying that they were going to press today. I don't have
knowledge. Unlicensed games are
so hopefully they confirm it, but it's not even
the console manufacturer also has every right to block unlicensed games
because they're taking away.
is a type of unlicensed
But I guess we shouldn't buy another TV until we have the refund.
This means that you can music or this is illegal, which means the company can get in trouble for producing it. To get around potential legal trouble, these companies will usually go under aliases. Sometimes it's not always known to develop some bootleg games.
It was building up to Christmas
happens to
and it
have a
was
lot of
reduced.
unlicensed and bootleg
It was
games.
a
Christmas sale.
The popularity of the
So
console. Companies are going to want to make games for a console that people own so that they can
it's about 43-inch TV.
and those strict policies.
Yeah,
Making
really.
games initially was expensive because you had to pay for some of the extra costs. It also
I have seen enough fun.
Nintendo. Companies didn't like these rules, and some would make unlicensed games instead. While the NES was a big market for many bootleg games, it wasn't the only console to receive them.
I want to know whether they get this slice or
Protecting independent games. For the most part, they were a contract developer, which meant they made games for other companies to publish. You're given a couple of pieces on the right side, and you must fit all of them on a stage. These games are types of things you would see on a flip phone and nothing special, but playable. The run on the NES was short-lived in terms of game count, but they had a much bigger focus on innocence. A common tactic of many bootleg companies was to release games that were popular on other consoles. Sometimes even console-exclusive games will be brought over, like Super Mario World on the NES. This was an interesting strategy. Maybe I'll buy the bootleg version of a game. Let's take a look at some of GameTech's Genesis games. Here's Bomb Boy. It's a top-down perspective. You must destroy all the enemies on the screen on the exit. The bombs hurt the enemies, but they can also hurt you, so you have to be careful how you place them. This is obviously a Bomberman clone with nothing particularly original about it. All of the power-ups in this game are exactly the same as the ones from Bomberman. Graphics are good, and it's a new world, you're which is nice. There's no horizontal scrolling like the original Bomberman, it's all on a single screen. The level design can also be weird at times. In one stage, you're immediately placed next to an enemy. That's not fair. But that's because Bomberman is good. Let's try Adventurous Boy.
So in Iran and Israel, there's no victims, I guess.
To complete the level.
fighting, like it's 50-50.
Left and right, and when you do complete
So
the
there's no
tasks, you play the
victim.
boss.
The victim is like
Periodically, a
I think
story
no one
icon
is at
will show
fault,
up where you can purchase
or
items.
maybe they are both at
With a
fault.
game like Adventurous Boy, I was
Well, I
expecting
think
to try out mode, but
whoever's
it's
at
actually
fault really
a fantasy
depends
zone.
on what your view is, what your
The
opinion
game
is.
does look nice graphically, but the
So
controls aren't terrible.
you
There's
basically
certainly a scrolling glitch where
a
your character
Muslim
moves very
country
slow when the
fighting
screen is
against a
moving.
Christian
One thing I
and
do
Jewish
like though is that when you die,
country,
you start
and
reeling
a
off.
lot of
This
what's
would be an R-rated
difficult,
game,
the
but the
tension
controls really ruin
is
it for me.
because of the
I'm
religious
not sure why they even
differences.
bothered making this game when the
There's
Genesis got Super Fantasy Zone, which is a
And
far
people
better
say, well,
game.
it's not really a religious
Let's
war,
try
but I mean, the way the Iranians are
as a tank, and you must
is,
defeat all the
is
enemy
partly
tanks to
an
beat the
extreme
level.
version of
You also
Islam.
must defend the statue at the bottom of the screen. There's items you can
So I
collect
don't
that
know.
help you out
I
along
mean,
the way.
I don't know.
The
I mean, it's one of
developers
those things.
successfully copied Battle City on the
I think
Famicom.
Iran,
Unfortunately, they did not bring over the best
if
feature of
they
that
managed to
game.
make a nuclear
It's
bomb, I
not
think
create
they'd
your own
probably
levels of
would use
Super
it.
Tank War.
They'd certainly threaten
It's
to
an
use it.
alright game, but Battle City is better. I can understand why
Perhaps
they brought
they're
this game
only
over because it was
2 or 3 years
previously a
away from
Famicom game
making
and
a
there was
nuclear
never a
bomb.
Genesis version. But a game like this is a bit too
You could
simple
also argue, well, if
it's
they did make
console
a
like
nuclear
this.
bomb,
Here's
who
my
would they
game too.
attack?
Interesting
Well,
that
they
both
probably
Young
just
and
attack
adult Simba
Israel.
are on the title screen.
And
I guess it
Israel's
could
not
be
this
two different
country,
lions.
Israel's not America. Israel's so you could argue why is it not just Israel doing it? American film. But America has a lot of
Go to the website you love.
part of the problem is there's a big amount of oil in many parts of the
For
world.
your words,
I think probably about half of the world's
your
oil
opportunity,
comes from that
your
part of the
breathing.
world. So America's always had a lot of interest in it.
Want to go?
Because where everyone gets gas and oil from.
Yeah, always.
It's
And
obviously
America has a very
similar
strong
to the
relationship
initial
with
Lion King
Israel.
game
I
approaching.
don't quite know
Simba
why.
can actually swat at enemies, unlike the original game. If you collect one of the stars, you become adult Simba.
I listen to American radio
you
quite
transform
often
back into young
because
Simba.
I enjoy thinking about it.
It's similar to the original game, where you can pick
Try
up
on the
a
radio.
storage on our platform. Look like any Lion King movie I've ever seen. Have you ever seen a lion roam around
You keep
China?
referring
The
to
game is extremely
the
entertaining.
Bible
I
about
fell to the wall and landed somewhere I didn't want to be. It
Israel
wouldn't
being
fall to the floor
second
and ended up
catastrophic effect in countries.
I agree with that.